All right, so today we're going to move into Chapter 4, Section 4. I'm skipping Section 3, factoring quadratics. And we're going to take several days on this section to make sure we really understand what's going on. So factoring, what we're doing now, is essentially undoing the distributive property. So I want to review what the distributive property is. Hopefully you remember that says when a number, say A, is multiplied into a quantity of numbers, usually set off by parentheses or some other grouping symbols, you can distribute that A to get an equivalent result. So A multiplied by the quantity B plus C is equal to A times B plus A times C. So then in factoring, we are undoing that. So instead of distributing the A through there, we're going to pull the A out. So we recognize that both terms here have an A. So we pull that A out. And when we divide AB by A, we're left with B. When we divide AC times A, we're left with C. So these are equivalent statements. Distributing and factoring are really just inverses of each other. So one example here, factor 2x squared plus 10. So this is a quadratic. We want to find something that is a factor of both terms. So this is why it was important for us earlier to identify factors and understand factors of numbers. So if there is something that goes into both 2x squared and 10, that's where we want to go. And really, we want to make sure we find the greatest common factor. So there are a lot of ways to make sure that you have the greatest one. You just have to find the largest thing that goes into both of these numbers. So the largest thing that goes into 10 is 10, but we should clearly know that 10 does not go into 2. On the other hand, the biggest thing that goes into 2 is 2, and 2 also goes into 10. So I know that the greatest common factor of these two terms is 2. So I'm going to write a little bit of extra work here so that we can watch the process go through. But normally I would not write this much work out. 2x squared is written as 2 times x squared. And 10 can be written as 2 times 5. So now that we've identified something that goes into both of these terms, we're going to factor it out. Since 2 goes into both of these, we're going to factor the 2 out, and that will leave us with x squared plus 5 in the quantity. And that is our factored answer here. So I pulled the 2 out, and I'm left with x squared plus 5. So it's 2 times the quantity x squared plus 5. And you could check your work to know you're at least equivalent by saying what would happen if I distributed the 2. 2 times x squared is 2x squared. 2 times 5 is 10. So I know this is equivalent. I haven't made a mistake anywhere. Okay, so then our next one here, this actually is not a quadratic, but it still helps us understand factoring. So I want to go through this one too. We want to know the greatest common factor of negative 7x and 14. So the largest number that goes into both terms. The largest number that goes into 14 is 14. That will not go into 7 though. However, 7 will go into negative 7, and 7 will go into 14. So 7 is going to be part of my greatest common factor. And I always want us to use the same sign as whatever is in front. So if the leading term is negative, I want to factor a negative out. So we're going to factor a negative 7 out of here. And if you factor negative 7 out of negative 7x, you're just left with x. If you factor negative 7 out of 14, you are left with negative 2. So we believe this should factor as negative 7 multiplied by the quantity x minus 2. And again, if we wanted to check our work, negative 7 times x is negative 7x. Negative 7 times negative 2 is positive 14. So this is equivalent. And it factors as negative 7 times quantity x minus 2. And then the last one we're going to do today.
It is 10 minutes, 9 minutes till 11 o'clock.
I'm just going to talk over Mr. Cox here because his announcement isn't important for this video. Factor negative 12x squared minus 30x. We want to see the biggest term or biggest factor that goes into both of these.
They will be there, and they will leave 11:05 and head to those schools. They will not turn around and come back and get you if you missed one. So please be out there, wait on. Thank you.
So if we think about the biggest number that goes into both 12 and 30, the biggest number that goes into 30 is 30, but that won't go into 12. The biggest number that goes into 12 is 12, but that won't go into 30. So then we need to go down a little bit. What other numbers go in here? They're both even numbers, so I know I could factor out a 2, but I want to make sure that I don't have any bigger factors because I want to pull out the greatest common factor. So 4 is another one that goes into 12. 3 also goes into 12 and goes into 30, so I could do 3. 4 goes into 12, but it does not go into 30. 5 does not go into 12. 6 does go into 12, and 6 goes into 30. And the next biggest factor of 12 is 12. So 6 is going to be part of my greatest common factor. Remember, we want to match the sign of the leading term, so we're actually going to factor out a negative 6. And there's something else that goes into both of these terms. This can be kind of easy to miss, but both of these terms also contain an x. This one has an x squared. This one has an x. So I know x goes into both of them. So then I can write this by pulling out a negative 6x. If I pull negative 6 out of negative 12 divided by negative 6 is a positive 2. And then if I pull an x out of x squared divided by x is x. And then if I divide negative 30x by negative 6x, the x's divide out, and negative 30 divided by negative 6 is a positive 5. So this should factor as negative 6 times the quantity 2x plus 5. And I'm going to one more time check my work. Distribute. That would be negative 12 x squared and then minus 30x. So we match up here, and I feel good about my answer.